Hello, and welcome to the Biomass Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Anna Simet. Hope you're all doing well. Beginning today and over the next coming weeks, we will be chatting with industry leaders who will be taking the stage during the general session at the upcoming International Biomass Conference and Expo, which will be held in Atlanta, Georgia, March 18th through the 20th, to find out their critical topics of discussion and what we should all know and be paying attention to. So today I have with me our first guest of the series, my friend Tim Portz, Executive Director of the Pellet Fuels Institute. Tim, hello, and thanks for coming onto the podcast.
Hey, great to be here, Anna. Long-time listener.
Thank you. So, Tim, for those who may not know, maybe we start by having you explain a little bit about what the PFI is, who you represent, and what your mission is.
Yeah, sure. So the Pellet Fuels Institute is a trade organization that represents the manufacturers of wood pellets for domestic markets predominantly, although not exclusively, but predominantly our members satisfy domestic heating pellet and barbecue pellet demand in North America. And so our mission is to protect our members' right to do business and ensure that policies are as favorable as they can be for our sector and that regulations don't create as significant of a headwind as they sometimes have a tendency to do. So that's how we engage in DC. Again, trying to maximize our opportunities for tailwinds via favorable policies and neutralize or mitigate any of those challenges that are introduced by well-meaning but maybe poorly conceived regulations.
I think that's a good segue into my next question. So you have said previously that the wood pellet heating sector is facing a number of regulatory headwinds. So can you talk a little bit about that, the misinformation, and then why it's critical to communicate with policymakers?
Yeah, I think the big challenge for us is that so often in today's sort of political landscape, there are narratives that are developed around products. So it doesn't necessarily, it's certainly not exclusive to energy products, but that's the water we swim in. So those are the waters and sort of headwinds that I pay attention to. The reality is that wood pellets are an exceedingly clean home heating fuel. And there are requirements, in fact, for the appliances that burn our fuel, and they must emit less than 2 grams per hour of PM 2.5. That's particulate matter that measures less than 2.5 microns. That's 2 grams per hour. Stoves are tested, and they're not allowed to be sold if they cannot achieve emissions at less than 2 grams per hour. So there are guideposts and sort of boundaries about emissions. Those are in place. And again, American consumers are burning wood pellets today, presumably in appliances that emit less than 2 grams per hour. However, our detractors, folks that would like to see solid wood fuels combusted less regularly for home heating, like to tell a different story. So right now underway, there are efforts to look more closely at sort of the testing, stove testing methodologies. And I don't anticipate that the folks that are conducting those studies are interested in coming back and saying, oh, actually, the stove testing is satisfactory. And we're satisfied that the tests do deliver results that we're comfortable with. So someone has to watch out for that. And so ourselves and our partners in the appliance sector, organizations like the Hearth Patio Barbecue Association, stove manufacturers, are engaged with the EPA, are engaged with organizations and other agencies that are engaged in this effort and want to make sure that the stove testing is fair and does provide consumers with a low-cost option to use solid fuels if they so choose. So, I would say that's probably our biggest priority right now, is really trying to make sure that the regulatory landscape is at least fair to the technology, fair to our product, and also recognizes that, again, wood pellets are utilized by maybe 1 million American households to heat their homes in a cost-effective manner.
Mm-hmm. So, Tim, obviously, we just had an election. Any initial insight or remarks on what you think that means for your sector? I know you've had some longtime supporters within Congress. How's that looking, or do you think it's going to be a lot of just kind of wait and see?
I don't know. My suspicion is that the Trump administration won't waste a lot of time in doing something that feels different. I think that's what the American electorate, indicated they wanted when they went to the polls, whenever that was, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. So I suspect that there will be some real momentum for some change. Now, where does that change start to show up first? Does it show up in our stuff? I don't know. In 2018, it became clear to me that the results of the election are going to be what they are, and it's up to trade associations to make the most of whatever, however the balance of power, if you will, shakes out from a party perspective. So a pretty resounding victory for Republicans, really grabbing control of the Senate, obviously the executive branch. It looks like the House, as we're talking, it looks like the House is going to go sort of to Republican majority. I think there's something like 18 races that are still too close to be called. One of our longtime friends, who's actually a Democrat in Maine, is in a ranked choice recount right now. That's Jared Golden in Maine's second congressional district. So the reality is that trade associations need to be prepared, including the PFI, need to be prepared to make the most of the Congress and the executive branch that they have. To wit, I think that our ambitions with some regulatory reform, maybe some relief, maybe just some common sense approach to some of these, which again, what have felt like very targeted attacks on our technology and on our fuel product. I think that we like our chances to have some ears that are a little bit more willing to listen to what we're up to, what our product really is, how it's actually tested, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel good about that. And then on the policy front, we're waiting for a farm bill. I think it's likely that the farm bill might be one of the first things that Congress takes up. We're in an overtime period already with the farm bill, so we're sort of running on an extension, and a farm bill needs to be passed. So I suspect that might be one of the first things. And of course, there's some provisions and programs inside of the farm bill that are important to our sector. The community wood programs, the wood innovation grants that our members have used to deploy things like better and more efficient, cleaner drying technologies, et cetera. The nice thing about those programs within the farm bill is they enjoy bipartisan support. Sort of before it became clear that we weren't going to get a farm bill done before the election, we had indications from both the Democratic farm bill package and the Republican farm bill package that those programs and others that are important to us were likely going to be included in, again, each side's proffered farm bill. So we feel good there. We have some tax credit stuff on the horizon. So there's really a lot at play. I think it will be very interesting to see how this all shakes out in the context of, maybe a completely Republican controlled Congress. But again, there's a lot about our industry that both parties like. We're rural jobs, we're renewable energy. We support a larger commodity based industry in this country, and that's wood products manufacturing. So it's not surprising that we enjoy widespread support for those programs, and I feel good about our position there. But we need to get to DC, and we intend to get to DC, sometime in the first quarter. Certainly to reconnect with our, supporters who won their elections and are still in Congress, and to introduce our technology, our needs, our policy wants, our regulatory concerns to those folks that are new. So we look forward to that, absolutely.
Okay, good answer. Last question, Tim. As most people across the US and Europe, for that matter, have experienced, we haven't really had a good cold winter in a while, which is obviously critical to the well-being of this sector. Can you talk a little bit about that and the ways that has impacted certain, dynamics of the industry?
Yeah, happy to do it. And in fact, I was just working on this week's issue of the Pellet Wire, and I was writing some commentary on the August EIA data frequent readers of the Pellet Wire know that that's just a monthly ritual for us, is to look at the data that's been published by the Energy Information Administration and see what it foretells about what's happening in the space. And yes, while the data is rearward looking, again, there's a 2-month lag. So August was just released the first part of this month. So it is rearward looking in that regard, but it is informative. And if you spend a lot of time in the data, you begin to see patterns. And the patterns, of course, are that wood pellet producers have the same access to this data that I do. In fact, they have it even better because they have access to their own data. And wood pellet producers are reticent to build inventories too high. Remember that every ton of pellets that sits on the ground is essentially shrink wrapped cash. And until those pellets are moved on down the line, they can't really convert that into cash. It's just locked. And so laying in too much inventory is not favorable. But of course, being caught short isn't ideal either. So it's a little bit of a Goldilocks situation. But what we are seeing so far with the data in 2024 is that producers are behaving as you might expect when sales are slow. Why are sales slow? You just nailed it. It's the weather. And cold days, they lead to consumers turning up the thermostat, which leads to the auger spinning fast on their pellet appliance, which leads to more pellets finding themselves in the burn pot. And without that, nothing really happens. So right now we see producers that are operating at less than full throttle, sales that are slightly down, and inventories that are, we closed August with nearly 350,000 tons of wood pellets on the ground. It's not an unprecedented number, but it is a number that is definitely above the 5-year average. So I think until we see some temperatures really cooperate, so maybe if the Trump administration could really do something for the pellet sector, they could do something about all these mild temps. And I realize that's probably not possible, but
No.
Hey. So yeah, it's, when you're talking to heating professionals, whether it be wood pellets or heating oil or propane or natural gas, those are really the only people in the room that are cheering for cold winters. Maybe ice fishing, resort owners and snowmobile salespeople, but it would lump us in with that. We're cheering for cold weather. We just haven't really had much of it yet, Anna. And I think the sales so far, again, what we can't see is what's happened in September, October, and the early part of November, not in a public data way, but we do know what the temperatures have been. So I suspect that as those numbers come out, September and October sales, we're going to see that this pattern of just sort of lackluster or soft sales is going to continue. And what we really need is a cold snap to settle over the northeastern United States starting, I don't know, next week and lasting until about April. So
Right.
that's on Tim's Christmas list.
All right, Tim. Well, I think that'll do it. So I want to thank you for coming onto the podcast today and chatting with us about the domestic wood pellet heating industry. And I certainly look forward to your presentation at the IBCE.
Terrific.
Yeah, and to our listeners, learn more about the International Biomass Conference and Expo taking place in Atlanta, Georgia, March 18th through the 20th at biomassconference.com. Producers do get in free, so make sure to look into that to see if you qualify. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.